Hello, Sam here, editor of Oracle Time, and today, for the latest in our series on British watchmaking, I am joined by collector and CWC expert Jonathan Hughes. If you don't mind, would you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm an entrepreneur and investor in financial technology, fintech. So professionally, absolutely nothing to do with watches, which means that my hobby and watch collecting and studying CWCs is a nice break from worrying about whether or not my businesses are all about to go bust.
Which sounds nice and dubious. Right, let's start with sort of how you began collecting. So what was the sort of first serious watch you bought yourself?
It was a Rolex Air King,
Okay.
34mm, nice champagne dial. And I went out, so this was early 90s, I went out with my second ever pay packet when I started working for an insurance company and spent the entire month's pay on a nice semi-vintage Rolex. And that was basically my one watch collection for, I don't know, 10, 12 years. Had a couple of other things, but that was really my one watch. And then I guess about, sort of 20 years or so ago, I started buying other watches. I guess I probably got around about 250 watches at the moment. So I'm telling you that because I'm sure my wife is not going to watch this.
Let's hope not. So obviously you're here because a good portion of that 250 are British watches.
Yeah.
When did you sort of start thinking that British watches were the kind you would invest in? And what was it about British watches at the time that sort of got you interested?
I mean, as a Brit, I guess, there's always that patriotic element.
Nice bit of home pride.
But also, I'm able to meet the people who are actually running watch brands here. So I'm able to spend time with, people who've set up businesses, enthusiasts who are, have their own brands, people who work for the bigger brands. And there's always a big part of me that's very interested in the people side of the watches. And I want to be engaged by and interested by the people who are making things and committing to them as much as the watches themselves. But I think there's also, a good British watch combines, sort of the elegance of a British gentleman with that sort of straightforwardness and sort of clunkiness that you don't get from or maybe solidity is a better word. You don't get that so much from the Swiss watch industry. They tend to be more refined. There tend to be a lot more emphasis on decoration and finishing.
And probably a bit more trend-led as well,
Yes.
as an industry.
Yes.
Speaking of, would you mind mentioning what you're wearing today?
So I'm wearing the Struthers Kingsley.
Fantastic.
This was I think one of their first custom-built watches. They still make it. I think this is a 40mm. They just recently come out with a 38mm case. The Struthers are fantastic people. They're great craftspeople. They run a wonderful business.
You mentioned the sort of personal connection with brands.
Exactly,
It's
yes.
very easy to have a personal connection with Craig and Rebecca.
Yeah, and you can go and visit their workshop in Birmingham. You can get to know them as I have. But it is, this is, in many ways, this is, or epitomizes a lot of the things that I love about British watchmaking. A ton of British craftsmanship in there. You can meet the people. You can get a watch that really kind of speaks to you. And it's got that, as I say, it's got that sort of solidity with elegance that I like about the profile and the case as well.
So at one end you have a fair few CWCs. Another you have not only Struthers but you own a Roger Smith as well.
Yep.
that's a huge variance just within the British part of your collection. So what is it that you look for in a watch that makes you want to buy it?
I mean, I love the fact that you could actually trace both CWC and the Roger W. Smith back to Harrison and H4. H4, the first genuinely reliable and accurate watch. Also, the world's first issued military watch, commissioned by the Admiralty. And so, you look then at the lineage from that through to both CWC and from Harrison, kind of through Breguet to Daniels to Smith. Those they come actually from a very similar tradition. But I like very straightforward things. I'm very much a kind of WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And I like the simple design is incredibly hard to do. So my Roger W. Smith is a Series 1, the basic and most simple model. But I love the fact that it's literally just an incredibly high quality, incredibly robust as well, because I've banged it against various walls and tables on many times. But high quality, very robust, but beautifully designed, simple watch. The same thing with the CWCs. They're just designed for simplicity, ease of use, legibility. So I like to see design and construction and thinking that has created something great from simplicity.
Fantastic. Are there any other sort of British brands that are kind of exciting you at the moment? Maybe some of the more up and coming brands?
I love Anordane.
That's fair. They're getting a lot of love.
Their dials are incredible, and actually that's one of the other things that really excites me about what is happening in British watchmaking at the moment is some of those craft revival, and doing handmade things. So the amount of work and experimentation and effort that has gone into coming up with those dials, it's really admirable. And as I say, that sort of...
God knows how many rejects of those dials they get through. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So Anordane, I think, is doing great stuff. I do love Fears. I think the way that Nick has brought that business back.
You actually have a Brunswick here.
I do, yes. Yeah, I have the Blue Dial Brunswick, which I believe is now discontinued. So I'm happy to have got one of them, and I absolutely adore the Platinum Brunswick.
Yeah, which it is gorgeous, and it's a good weight of platinum.
It's a serious weight, and I've got a real thing for closed casebacks. I love a solid caseback, but just because, as I say, this idea of robustness, solidity, elegance, and you turn over the Platinum Brunswick, solid platinum caseback. It is like holding a mini ingot of platinum in your hand.
Do you have your name down for one?
I don't yet, but I have. I'm kind of examining the bank balance, seeing whether it would tolerate one at one point. Studio Underdog. I think I love their creativity.
Rich has been killing it with those designs.
Yeah,
ever more British summertime.
And if you look at the British watch industry at the moment, there's a ton of these enthusiast brands, which are just, a lot of them are just great passion projects.
It's a nice way of saying micro brand.
Because there's only so many vintage-inspired divers that the world really needs. But this is one of the things I love about Studio Underdog is it's an enthusiast brand, it's a micro brand, but is doing something new and interesting, not kind of creating maybe a bit of a pastiche of times past.
And embracing colour, which is always good to see. In fact, something that has been a bit of a through line with a lot of recent British watch brands, colour and sort of a bit more vibrancy to the watches that perhaps we haven't seen from the Swiss side particularly.
Yes, a bit more fun. And as you can see, I'm all about the vibrant colour.
Yeah, low-key blue, definitely vibrant. So if you don't mind, you've got a few watches here.
Sure.
It'd be good to briefly go over some of them. So obviously, we've spoken about the fears briefly, but if you'd like to go into a little more details to sort of why you opted for that particular model.
Yeah. So this, I believe, was the first model that had the applied indices and the
Yeah.
applied numerals. And I thought that brought something really nice to the dial. I love the way that it's the dial has got a number of elements and is slightly brushed to it. And you know, the Brunswick I still think is an absolute triumph. It's a beautifully
lovely.
elegant watch. It wears really nicely. This blue one is I actually have a couple of the Brunswicks. I've got a Midas. I've got one of the original.
The Midas
white
is really
ones.
cool.
That's a
the
great
mix
watch,
of
yeah.
brass and gold plating for that really
Yes, to get
unusual
that
colour.
rolled gold. That
Yeah,
old rolled gold.
I still
look.
love my white dial one. I think that's perfectly classical and clean and just lovely.
But the Brunswick is, you know, it's just a great simple dress watch, and I you know, so the blue dial just works really well with my multiple tones of blue.
And then you have a Smith.
So I couldn't resist bringing the last mass-produced English watch. So this is from my birth year. So this was issued to the British Army in 1969. So I was actually given this watch by my family for my 50th birthday. But it is, you know, this was the last time that England had a scale watchmaking industry. And Smiths went bust, or rather the watchmaking bit of Smiths went bust a year or two after this watch was produced.
You talk about scale. How many watches would that have been a year?
So they were making probably in the high single digit thousands by the end. Smiths produced obviously hundreds of thousands of watches over its lifetime, but I think these runs were maybe 8, maybe 10,000 watches a year for the British military. But even then, they were struggling. I mean, in the 60s, there's a lot of documented discussions within the MOD and the services about how they could award more contracts and more development work to Smiths in order to extend the life of the business. And when the MOD was looking at a new general service watch across, you know, all of the services, they did try to give the work to Smiths, and they tried to get Smiths to develop a new one. And in the end, that work went, of course, to Hamilton in the early 70s and Switzerland, and they've just produced tens and tens of thousands of them.
Which, you know, leads us to your other two watches.
So then this is the business that Ray went on to form. This is a mechanical chronograph from 1982. So this would have been the very last year that the British military commissioned mechanical watches. So these chronographs were produced first by Hamilton in the early 70s, and then after a couple of years, CWC took over the contract. And in the early 80s, a couple of other brands had a go at it. Precister produced a run of them. But this was 1982, saw the very last run of mechanical chronographs. After this, the contract went to Seiko with a quartz chronograph. The year before, 1981, was the very last year of mechanical issued dive watch, which was also a CWC. Although, again, to bring up another Precister again, Precister did a very small number of mechanical dive watches in 1982. So this is, I love this watch because it is the end of the era of mechanical military watches.
Fantastic. And just briefly, the sort of last watch you have here, another Cabot watch company.
So the final one. So this is the SBS. So ordered initially in 1987 by the SBS as a variant of the Royal Navy diver. Blacked out case for low reflection, day date, and for the first, I guess, 10 years of its life, you know, really very much restricted to genuine special forces, SBS, SAS, some of the Royal Marines. This is from 2001, when the decision was made to make this the standard issued dive watch for the British military. So they stopped ordering in 2000 the stainless steel RN dive watches, and ordered several hundred of these in 2001, and then some more in 2005. They had a little bit of a pause and then started ordering them again in 2015. So I really like this one. So this is an issued one from 2001, because it is that changing of the guard. It goes from being a relatively niche special forces watch to being a much more broadly used.
How do you sort of get hold of a commissioned watch? Does that mean that someone that was given to has then turned around and sold it once they've left?
Yes, I mean generally someone has left the military and just hung on to their watch. There's various schools of thought on that. In most cases, quartermasters, were not that interested in trying to get back, expensive but relatively small items. I have another from 2001 where the para whose watch it was bought it and showed me his payslip to show me that he bought it as basically an obsolete item. And then 20 years later, when he left the military, he sold it to me. But say an old watch that someone has worn in the field for 4 or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, the British military probably doesn't really want it back. There is a difference with a lot of the current issued watches popping up on eBay at the moment. So there's been a spate of the 2020 issue watches on eBay. And if you read the Daily Mail, which I'm sure you do,
avidly,
you will have read about a Royal Navy seaman being arrested and imprisoned.
I actually did read that.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have admitted that, but yeah, that was fantastic. Not that you did it, but that's
which is great.
Story.
Yeah, I mean, you don't. For me, there is a difference between buying a watch from someone who's worn it and served, and then left the military and kept the watch,
and between disappearing,
basically buying someone who's nicking it out of the back of the stores.
So just to sort of veer towards the sort of British watch industry as a whole at the moment, what do you kind of, as a collector, want to see more of?
It's hard to look at the British watch industry as a single thing. So for me, there's the craft end of it, which is Roger Smith, the Struthers, Garrick, Frodsham, maybe even Anodyne with what they're doing. There's a sort of heritage bit of it where I put in Vertex, Fears, Frodsham is a bit of an overlap, CWC, where these are brands that have been around for 50, 100, 150 years.
Even if they've been defunct in that time.
Even if they've come back.
They are heritage brands.
And particularly where like Fears or Vertex, they've been re-established by an original family member. I think that also makes a difference. And then you've got sort of the big brands and the enthusiast brands. And we forget about some brands, some British brands that have been around for a long time. Accurist,
yes,
1946. Seconda, 1966. And these are great British watch brands that they're major brands. They've actually been operating quite a long time. They don't produce the sort of watches that probably a watch collector.
But they do make some really cool, affordable timepieces.
They make some great watches, yeah. So you can kind of look at each of those areas. There's probably more enthusiast brands, as I put it. That probably makes up 50% of the count of brands. But I would like to see more at the craft end of the scale, and maybe that's just where I am in my collecting.
True. I feel like that's also the hardest end to really expand on when there aren't necessarily the skills here to expand that, to have more brands at that end, because we're talking about Struthers, Roger Smith, even Garrick and Frodsham, who are all a handful of people at most. So that's quite a difficult task to do.
I didn't say it was easy, but I think there's So I would be really fascinated to see, for instance, a British casemaking company. So of course we used to have Denison.
Mm-hmm.
It was briefly revived a few years ago as a watchmaking company.
Didn't know that actually.
It produced one watch, but Denison was a great, watchmaking company. In the same way that Anodyne, the highlight is the dial, and a lot of the craft and work that they put into a dial. Is there something? Is there space for a great watchmaking or casemaking business? There's definitely the skills for casemaking, and whether it's hand casemaking like this,
or even if it's just sort of machining that can be turned towards casemaking.
Yeah. So that I think there's enough craft and there's enough componentry in a watch that someone innovating in that space I think would be really interesting. I think the stuff that Roger is doing with nanotech and Manchester Metropolitan University in lubrication, that's super exciting. And I think Mike France, when you talked to him, talked a little bit about that sort of innovation in watchmaking. And I kind of put that, there's sort of, maybe it's sort of craft and science, but it's, I'd love to see more innovation.
British solutions to watchmaking.
Exactly, yes. I think the quest for a British-made movement is a fool's errand. The British watch industry is not going to support it. So according to the British Watch Alliance, 1 million watches last year, but total value of 125 million. So 125 quid each. Vast majority of them are quartz. There just isn't the scale or the value within the industry to support, certainly not in the medium term, a British watch movement maker.
Would you say that's a particular issue?
No.
No, fair enough.
But you look at if you want to do something really high end and handmade, there are multiple people already doing that. Roger, Frodson, Struthers, Garrick to some degree. So if you want to do something in that space, great. There are people doing it. If you want good quality mass production, Switzerland is fine. I love what Christopher Ward did with getting their own Swiss manufacturer. That's one route. But the vast majority of British watch brands, in fact, for the last 100 years, have used Swiss movements. And I don't personally think there's anything wrong with that.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap it up. So thank you very much, Jonathan, for coming along.
A pleasure.
Thank you for your time and your expertise.
Thank you. Well, great to chat.